Hi, I'm Dr. Bertice Berry, and I need to tell you this story. When my family lived in California, my children would get in a lot of trouble very often. And it was not because they misbehaved, but um, I would say because my mother lived with us. My mother lived with us, and my mother was born in 1918. You do the math. She was raised on a farm and she was raised by her grandparents. So there was some mamming that went on in our house. My children would say, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir, no, sir. Now, in California, that was not the cultural norm. And so very often my children got into trouble because they would say, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir, no, sir. They would call people Mr. and Ms. Um, and this caused a lot of problems. People would say, don't ma'am me. I'm not your ma'am. That's racist. Do not sir me. Mr. Brown was my father. You call me Bob. And so my kids were like a little confused because in our house, it was, to my mother, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. And actually, she required that they say it to me as well. And it wasn't like a strict rule as much as it was a cultural pleasantry. It was a custom. It was the culture. So when we moved from California to Georgia, and my children heard other people saying ma'am, they were like, Mom, there's a lot of black people. And everybody says ma'am. It was like, yeah, there's a lot of black people. And Mom, because we were in Savannah, a lot of people have dreadlocks. There's so many people with dreadlocks. We're not the only ones with dreadlocks. They were so happy. Look at all these dreadlocks, Mom. Look at all these black people. Black people, so many black people, so good. And they were excited about it. But they were really excited about this cultural norm that saying ma'am. And when we moved here, what was troublesome in California was not troublesome here. In fact, people would say, oh my goodness, your manners are impeccable. Now, where did you say you were from? And no one believed that they were from California because of the manners they had and the way they addressed everyone. But I will admit, I was a little confused because I saw folks use ma'am not just for people who were their elders. They used it on people who were younger. Sir was sometimes a young boy in the grocery store. Somebody was, it was ma'am and sir were used very often. And so I asked someone, when do you all address someone as ma'am or sir? Because I noticed it's going on. For me, it was about an age thing, a respect of age. They said it had nothing to do with no age, baby. If somebody hands you something, gives you something, shows you something, teaches you something, out of respect, you're saying, thank you, ma'am. It's like, oh, okay. Well, when do we use first names and we can get rid of all the, the titles? They said, when somebody tells you can't call me Mary, when you get close enough, you call people by their name. It's just a thing. And that little sentence was so layered in instruction and so layered in cultural milieu and norms and folk ways. And I wanted to do a whole study on it. It was so fascinating to me. And quickly, not only were my children seen as people with impeccable manners, I was too. I was led into spaces and conversations that quote unquote outsiders typically are not. To this day, people still assume that I'm from here, or at the very least was raised here and moved away and came back. Surely my parents or grandparents are from here because you have manners. And it's not just the ma'am and the sir. It's the lowering of the voice, the speaking with a sir. And it's not race. It's culture. And folks who come from out of town will ask me, how come you seem to have assimilated into this culture so quickly? And I think to myself, I don't think I assimilated. I speak the same way. I wear the same kind of clothes. I do. And I realized it was the way I was raised. I was taught to respect where I am, respect the people where I am, to learn from them, but to not be who I am. And the fact that I could speak with a double negative and most of you understood it. I think that in the United States, at the very least, we have lived this long and never been this close. I had a conversation recently with some women I love who we just call by first names. And we talked about how in our lifetime, we've seen enough racism. We've seen segregation and separation, and so much so that no one questioned it in our lifetime. We're not as old as my mother would be if she were living. But if she were living, and she is, she's proud of us for taking a moment to learn the folkways, the norms, the customs of the people where you are, and to respect it enough that they respect you. Ain't nobody changing me because I say yes, ma'am. I'm still the womanist, righteousness loving Black woman that I am. And I love you.